I was part of an organization called the New York Boys that traveled from New York City to Orchard Park projects, turned the city of Boston upside down and left a lifestyle for other young developed minds to look at and want to emulate. Today, when I realize how much harm that caused, it's not a badge of honor, it's a badge of shame.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Bounce Back Podcast. I'm your host, B. Luke. I got a special guest with me today. Why don't you introduce yourself, tell the people your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself.
All right, thank you, B. Luke. First and foremost, with all things, I like to say peace.
Peace.
Peace for me is supreme understanding between people for the benefit of the whole. And that's paramount to who I am. I was born Jeffrey Hilton, but at a very early age, I became a 5%, and I took on the name Supereme Hassan. The name Supereme Hassan is a cultural name. It is a name that have brought great benefit to me because as a 5%, I was told that we have to live up to the name that we create for ourselves. However, it is a name that has brought a whole lot of judgment, a whole lot of premature judgment, and that judgment principally have come from broken systems of government. As a 5%er, I was told that we were a security threat group inside of the prisons, and the way, instead of having that conversation with someone who had no understanding of who or what a 5% was, I said, we'll show them. So I come from a large family, and it was when I was 12 years old that inside of my bedroom, I grew up in New York City, was born in Brooklyn, Bed-Stuy, 263 Willoughby Ave. Shout out Brooklyn.
Salute.
But I was raised in Queens, Queens strong, all day, every day, baby. I lived in a 4-bedroom apartment with 8 brothers. I'm one of 8 boys and 4 girls, both parents in the household. As you can imagine, growing up in the 70s and the 1980s, dead smack in a hood in New York City, and particularly during the 80s, it was the height of the crack cocaine epidemic. And as a child, being one of 12, my parents couldn't get me the things I thought I needed. The things that I wanted, they couldn't provide for me. I always had an ability to negotiate, organize, and persuade. So I took those same skill sets out into the street and I started selling crack cocaine in New York City. By the time I was 13, I had my first apartment in New York City at 13 years of age.
Wow.
I had a crew of guys working for me. The youngest was 24, the oldest was 26 or 27 years old. I was the lieutenant, or what would be the equivalent of a chief operating officer in a corporate structure for a person that I called my cousin. I carried that off into everything I did. I hit the streets as a way of earning a living. But I really never felt so deep into the streets that I disassociated with my childhood friends. For me, friendship is very, very important because family is very important. And the first friends that you get are the ones in your family. Having a large family of 8 brothers and 4 sisters, we develop friendships. Those friendships start with ruptures and repairs. You have arguments with your brothers, you have arguments with your sisters, but because you're family, you work to repair them. So unbeknownst to me, I was getting this training that would ultimately lead to what I eventually am doing now, which I'll come back to. But that growing up in New York City to me was a blessing. I grew up in Queens. Queens at the time was noted, and is probably still noted as the melting pot of America. So I got to interact with all shades, all cultures, all ethnicities of people, and that gave me the benefit and the value of how to show up confidently myself while interfacing and sharing space with other people and not being afraid to be myself. And an example of that is a lot of my homies back then, before I hit the streets, these brothers was driving Benzes and BMWs and wearing whatever they wanted to wear. That didn't stop me from being confident in myself until, what really pushed me into the streets is I love my independence. And I knew, respect for my parents, I couldn't do what I wanted to do underneath their roof. So my pops gave me an ultimatum, like, yo, you got to stop cutting up. But if you don't want to listen, you can go. My untrained mind at 13 years old, we know today through brain science development that our minds are not developed upwards until we're 27 years of age. I thought that was a pass. I thought that was permission. So I left, and that's what led me to selling crack. That's what led me to having my own apartment. That's what led me to being a teenage soldier in the urban jungle called America, and getting mixed up and everything that came along with that. So fast, I caught my first case in 1989 for robbing a taxi driver. Damn. Still young, emotionally undeveloped child. I had pockets full of money, but the taxi driver was running up the tab intentionally. So I said, okay, the saying hurt people, not being able to process that emotion of like shame, guilt. Oh, you gonna take advantage of me? I got you. So pulled out the blick, forced him out of the car, put him in the trunk, and took off. I got caught for that. I wound up going to Rikers Island. While on Rikers Island, I experienced things that no 16 and a half, 17-year-old should experience. I mean, wow. I can recall the time living in the mods, open space, had a mink hat at the time, and I used to rock my mink when I was to take a nap. I put my headphones on, tied the things down, and put it over my eye and just lay back. So I was coming up out of a nap, flipped it open, looked over. Homie in the bunk next to me was getting hit with some shit like this. Dormitory setting. Looked over, and I didn't know then, but I know now, I was numb to that type of violence. Yeah. Violence became the language that the one who can speak it the most fluently was the one who got the most respect. So understanding that, codifying that in my undeveloped mind and just moving forward, I became violent on Rikers Island. That's how I was able to get through Rikers Island. And to keep it a whole buck, I'm from the street, but I don't like nothing about the streets. I don't like nothing about the streets. What I loved about being in the streets is that I was with my friends, I was with my homies. Right. And that was family for me. And that's something that I realized, but I was good as an actor in the streets.
So streets just came with the friendship.
Streets just came with the friendship. And I was real good at it because I always stood on business. I stood on integrity. I stood on dignity and respect. And those are all the principles that kept me alive up until this point, And what I mean by when I say that, I was part of an organization called the New York Boys that traveled from New York City to Orchard Park projects. Really turned the city of Boston upside down with crack cocaine, with powder cocaine, with weed, and left a lifestyle for other young developed minds to look at and want to emulate. Today, when I realize how much harm that caused, it's not a badge of honor, it's a badge of shame. And I don't like to feel shameful, so I try to undo that feeling by working to repair that harm as much as possible in any way that I can do. So being a part of a multiple state organization, the shit was really bananas. Yeah. As a young boy, I had a lot of influence. They knew I would bust my gun as anybody else would bust their gun. They knew I had respect. They knew I could command men. Some people felt threatened by that.
Got you.
Yep.
Just quickly, so you're in Rikers. So I take it this is after the whole Rikers Island thing.
Indeed.
You're in Rikers Island. You're a young man, probably a child, I would say. You know what I mean? But what ends up coming with that case? Do you get time? Do you have to do a state bid in New York?
Yeah, indeed.
The taxi driver situation.
Right. I did a one-year bid. I'm glad you came back to that. I served 1 year upstate, right? And because of that undeveloped mind, it was a game for me. Right. I knew how to do time.
So Elmira,
okay. Rikers Island, Elmira. You go through Elmira. My card number was B1242. I don't know why that number stays in my mind. 89B42 was my card number. Went through Elmira. Went to Cayuga, which is a level 4 prison. If we had to say which prison that would be compared to in Massachusetts, it would be Norfolk.
Gotcha.
Right? While at that prison, I think 60 days in to that prison, a couple of things happened that like really shaped me. I didn't know then, but I understand now. One of the things that all the OGs, all the elders, all the big homies, all the big brothers, they would line us up. Once we came in, they would line us up, literally, all strangers. We didn't know each other. They would put ditty bags in front of us, not the shit that the state gave you, but the stuff that the community put together for you. And they would tell us, before you look into that bag, our job is to get y'all home. These were brothers that ran with Nicky Barnes back in the days. These were brothers that was never getting out. But they had somewhere along their journey started caring about the future them. And they said, don't look in them bags. They said, we don't want to see you in the yard from 8 o'clock to 11:30. Go to school, get a certificate, because that's all you need to get out of here. Mm-hmm. And that much power talking to you, I didn't know. My young mom was like, yo, who the fuck are them?
Right.
But what hit me is when my big homie said, yo, you got to go to that meeting. You got to listen to him. It was structured. It was organized. Right. And that would inform me later on. I'll share coming to Massachusetts prison and how I moved.
Okay.
Right?
So how did you feel about that? Because you're in the streets, you're running your own crew pretty much, but now you're taking orders, but essentially there's a hierarchy.
Indeed.
I mean, did you take to that, or did you kind of resent it, or?
Right. So let me frame it like this. No, I didn't resent it at all. For me, everything is about structure. Coming from a large family, everything go back to that family unit. Both parents in the household. I had older brothers. If they told me something to do and it made sense, I was good with it. If it didn't make sense, I went against the grain. Coming up in New York, we was taught to listen to those who came before us, right? So when my big homies told me, yo, you gotta go, I just said, you gotta go to orientation. I said, I just came from orientation, the prison's orientation. They was like, no, you gotta go to orientation. I listened, and I understood, because I knew who they were, that there's a reason why they was telling them to come to this. And understanding, even with my undeveloped mind, yo, there's an ecosystem larger than just my hood. There's an ecosystem larger than just my big homies. And everybody works together. I was like, okay. Because when they said it with a measure of humility. And oftentimes we get it twisted. Humility means strength. It does not mean weakness. So that's when I heard, when you have that much power standing in front of you, they know who they are.
Yeah.
You can feel the energy coming from them. So you stand at attention. And that's what I did. I stood at attention with no feelings involved, because my big homies told me, you got to listen to them. And that's how that community was doing time in New York.
So they wasn't having you, because other people, they might have you crash out or,
Indeed.
you know what I mean, put in work, quote unquote. They would kind of steer you in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Is that how you did your bid, kind of?
That's exactly how I did my bid. That's how I learned how to do a time. They told, when I was on Rikers Island, when you go upstate, when you get sentenced, all the big homies are telling you, yo, when you get on the bus, listen to what the guards say. They wear plain clothes and these beige trench coats with big ass shotguns. One of the first things they tell you to do when you get on that bus, they said, you will not look back. Meaning, we're not looking back at where we're leaving, we're looking forward to where we're going. So they had already hardwired that in my mind. They was like, get all this shit out of your system on Rikers Island, because if you go up north, you go upstate, and you start acting up and you become a problem up there, he said they will lose you in that system. And it's anybody who did time in upstate New York and those who did not do time in upstate New York or know someone who did, New York at the time had 71 prisons.
Wow.
And it was easy to drug you up. The most popular psychotropic drug at the time was Therazine.
The Therazine shuffle, yeah.
The Therazine shuffle, and shift you from prison to prison. You'll wake up, you wouldn't know where you was at, you wouldn't know your home address, and eventually dudes was found left.
Wow.
It was like I don't know if it was a myth or a reality, but it was told so often, I believed it, that come January, they'll find bodies under Elmira. There's a certain section of Elmira every year.
Wow.
It's like, this is the time we go and clean up the mess. Every year. So that message, again, when you're young and you have an undeveloped mind, you're like a sponge. You take it in and it sits in your mind. So when I went to Nashville Street, coming back, Rikers Island was like, you gotta be a gorilla in the midst. Phones are free, but you gotta fight for your phone time. I took that same mentality to Nashville Street. And what I realized quickly was the OG from Columbia Point. He said to me, he's like, yo, I know who you are. They told me you was coming. You don't have to do that. But that's how I thought I had to do it. So it was check one. Going upstate, remembering those lessons, yo, chill out. Get all that shit out your system. It took me some time to really understand what chill out meant. The first 5 years of my bid was locked up in isolation. I was falsely accused of a homicide, my co-defendant and myself. And I spent the first 5 years of my bid inside of the box, locked up 23 hours a day. Now, I don't advocate for nobody to think segregation is where it's at. That shit is inhumane. However, where I was at that point in my life, I'm jumping back and forth, follow me. where I was at that point in my life, all the big homies, the majority of the big homies that raised me from New York, pinned me down. In the organization, the majority of them turned rat.
Wow.
So I was an 18-year-old sitting in a box, questioning everything about life.
Wow.
Like, how the fuck did I get here?
So let's bring it back. You get out from New York State Prison. It seems like you had dudes that wanted to guide you in the right direction and get you out. How much were they about you? Let's get you out. Let's have you stay out. Or is it something where you got out and kind of forgot about that? Or is just other things going on?
That was
the
on
brain
the
not
inside,
being developed.
Right. That was on the inside. And while you're on the inside, you fall in line with the structure that was there. But the whole time, a year is nothing. You ever heard the term a New York minute? Man, that year, I'm just leaving fancy cars, jewelry, girls, nightclubs, my own apartment. I'm thinking about how I'm going to get out there and I'm going to do it bigger than I did before I came in there. That's all I was thinking about. And in the process, I lied to myself, homie. I said, this ain't shit. That 1 year wasn't shit, bro. It was fun to me.
Right.
That's how silly I was.
Right.
I said, this ain't shit. I said, I could do 10 more of these. I said, and if I come back, I'm coming back for a body. Talk about prophetic thinking.
Yeah, self-fulfilling prophecy.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So I came back for a body, but it wasn't 10 years. It was 33.
And it was it was a wrongful conviction?
No, it wasn't a wrongful. I'm guilty.
Okay.
That's one thing that I stand on. I am responsible for the murder of a 19-year young black man as an 18-year-old young black man with a 17-year-old young black co-defendant who did not understand what the hell we was doing in that world. We couldn't understand. With that said, I accept full responsibility for the harm I caused to that brother. And if I had the permission of his family, I would name him because that's how I try to honor him, by speaking his name.
Yeah.
Right?
GPS signal lost.
Jeez, sorry about that.
Real time, bro. Live TV.
Yeah, no, we're not live anyway. I could cut that out.
Okay, peace.
Okay, yeah, my bad. Go ahead. So,
No worries. So
you said
I accept full
Okay.
responsibility
That's
for
good.
that.
Yeah.
Full responsibility, because that's how I was raised. When I go back to that hole, I went through a process by being in that hole. When you locked up 23 hours a day by yourself, you get to hear a lot of shit. But that shit is the shit that's inside of your head. So what I was doing was listening to questions of why, how, how did you get here?
Well, speak
are you
about
here?
that. How did you
Right.
get from New York
Excuse me.
to Massachusetts? How does that happen?
Right. So you have the 1 year bid. You have the lying to myself, the self-fulfilling prophecy. Came home, hit the streets like a New York minute. New York changes so rapidly.
I bet.
I had set up 2 drug blocks. One of the homies that I had working on one block, he skipped with some work. So now it's maker and owner. I made that block. That was my work. I got to take ownership of it, so I got to handle that. Long story short, when I got arrested for a blick, bailed out of Rikers Island. The homies like, we got to get you out of here. I had a choice of going to Asbury Park, New Jersey, Fayetteville, Virginia, Fayetteville, North Carolina, Richmond, Virginia, or Boston, Massachusetts, because we had crews in all of these cities and states. So I was like, I want to go to Boston. I haven't seen some of my friends that I grew up with. So that's what got me up here, running from the law in New York.
Friends from New York that came here. That's what you're talking about. Okay.
My whole crew that was in Boston were from 2 hoods in my block, 99th Street and 105th Street. These are 2 of the largest and most dangerous at that time, most dangerous and feared streets, blocks in my neighborhood. But everybody came together to get money.
Okay.
And one of my man, Vaughn in particular, I hadn't seen, my next door neighbor I hadn't seen in a minute. I said, I'm going to go see Vaughn. And that's how I got to Boston.
Okay, so what are the next events that happen? You get to Boston and then the crew's already set up out here?
I mean, set up in a major way. A lot of folks know, for those who don't know, the movie In Too Deep is a movie that's written behind, about the story of the New York boys traveling from New York City, going to Orchard Park. Though they filmed that movie in Ohio, the reason why they did film it in Ohio, because I forget the exact name of the department every city, every state has one. There's a bureau of something, Hollywood, something. They'll pay extra. They have one they're going to film in your neighborhood, or they'll say, we'll pay your extras. We'll take so many extras and pay them so many. What, to understand, the city of Boston was negotiating for a bigger payday than that the movie directors or the producers were willing to pay, so they took it to Ohio.
Oh, okay.
Right, so that's like, why did they do that in Ohio?
Yeah.
That's the background story behind that. Yeah, that movie was about my case, my team at the time. So
how long are you out there before you are now getting locked up for this homicide case? How long are you in Orchard Park?
And it's funny, I've been home now in about 9.5 months.
Okay.
Right, my team's been up there since about 84, 85. I came up permanently to stay for about 9.5 months.
Okay. Is this your first time in Boston? Had you been here before?
First time in Boston. I've always heard about the team, so it was like I've always was in Boston.
Right.
Because I'm like, yo, where's Vaughn? Where's Little Born? Where's Karate Born? Are they in Boston? When they come back to New York, they'll tell me, yo, what's going on in Boston? And it was like being in Boston, you know, but it was literally my first time being in Boston physically. First time being in Boston physically, 9.5 months. Murdered another human being, accepted a sentence of 15 to life, went through the process of going through Nashua Street, Concord, Walpole, Norfolk, and spending 5 years in a box shortly thereafter.
Okay.
So I think I was upstate. Wow. Probably 9.5 months too. I wasn't upstate a long time.
Okay.
Because it was literally the first 5 years of my bid.
So just walk me through that. You're upstate for 9.5 months until
I'm placed in a box.
Until you're in the box. Okay,
Right.
okay. And you said Nashua Street.
Nashua Street.
So just how do you get to Nashua Street? Do they arrest you on the spot? Is it you get a warrant for yourself?
So I got arrested on Halloween of 1990. They came to my house, arrested me. At the time, it was on the front page of the Boston Herald, New York boys, bodies, so on and so forth. Because it was Halloween weekend, I spent that weekend in Area B police station. Then from there, that Monday, I went to Nashua Street. I was in Unit 4-1.
So your first time in Massachusetts jail. I mean, any differences that you noticed? Was it easy to adapt? Because you said you already did like the prison thing.
That's a great question, and it's a sad. My answer to it is very, very sad. You know, over the last 2 years, sitting upstate, before I came home, I was reflecting on a lot of my childhood and growing up. You know, when you grow up in poverty and we can't afford, literally, because of the price of equipment. I came from a large family. There's a lot of things we couldn't afford. I couldn't afford it, right? A lot of my peers couldn't afford things either, so we would make up games. And oftentimes the games that were made up were the ones we inherited from the older homies. Bro, don't you know that they taught us a game called Rikers Island?
Wow.
And when this...
Talk about programming.
When this hit me, bro, I was at Shirley Medium. Cell 11 on the flats. Sitting on my bed, thinking about the shit. When it hit me, I was like, whoa. Bro, I was prepared for a broken criminal legal system by broken men.
Wow. Yeah.
It literally, so all of the principles that guide me as a community builder informed me as somebody in the streets, informed me as someone through my formative years in school, informed me as someone who came from a large family. I once had a brother, shout out to Black Cat Omar Cook. While we were in Old Colony Correctional Center, we had a Toastmasters group and we were doing table topics. And the subject came up was, how does a person know, we were in the AHC, the African Heritage Coalition, and the question came up, what's your purpose in life? And we were having this very robust sociological conversation about purpose in life. And Black Cat, he was like this in the back. And then he said, a person's purpose in life is what they did at 5. They're going to do the same thing at 10. They're going to do the same thing at 15. They're going to do the same thing at 20. They're going to do the same thing at 25. It made so much sense. There's a thread. So he said, if once you realize how you show up in your life and in your relationships, that's what you're going to do. I was always a protector. I was always a provider. I was always a thinker. I was always leading, but part of leadership teams. You know, so when going to Rikers Island, there was no fear because my brothers, I was getting lessons, bro. When I tell you, reflecting on that, I was getting lessons, bro. Masterclass lessons from my older brother, my older cousins, folks, the brothers in the hood. Yo, when you go to Rikers Island, don't tell nobody where you from. Stand on your own feet. When you go to Rikers Island, you're going to have to bang out for phone time. When you go to Rikers Island,
a lot of family.
A lot of family. When they talk about generational trauma, you're talking about generations of systemic harm and how those mitigating factors produce those generational traumas that become normative in the behaviors of those of us who come from those socioeconomic that socioeconomic background and those demographics. So when I think about that, I can't be angry or upset at those who came before me and those who passed that shit down to me. But while I was in that hole for those 5 years, bro, I was a mess.
Damn.
Because I am thinking about
5
that.
years.
I'm thinking about, yo, how did you get here? And I'm thinking about all the big homies that passed down all the lessons that we call the G code or we call keeping it a buck in the streets. And I'm like, none of them did.
Right. And to be fair too, sometimes I reflect myself and think like the big homies, most of the time they was kids too. Because like you said, you 13.
Facts.
So the big homies 17, 18,
15,
whatever it may be.
Right.
Children as well.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So.
And, you know, that really allows me today to show up in a more merciful and understanding way and fight that much harder to get to young folks and break that cycle.
So being so young and then catching such a serious case, just talk about like your mindset. Because yeah, it's one thing, you're exposed to a lot of violence. You're in New York, you're in upstate New York, but then the reality of maybe possibly doing the rest of your life in prison and being, how old were you at the time when I got that case?
When I got sentenced to 15 to life, November 2nd, 1991, I was 18.
Okay. So, but you were in Nashua Street probably when you were throughout your 17 years old or whatever. So just talk me through the mindset. Are you like, this is what comes with the game? Are you starting to be like, whoa, this shit just got real? So everything in between, I'm sure.
That's another great question, Big. And I've always been a curious person, but I've always been engrossed in whatever reality was my own at the time. That was my reality. And my curiosity, I don't even know if I consciously was thinking about surviving it. I was just in it. And all of the training leading up to my first incarceration prepared me for that one. Again, the codified messages we receive as young people become tapes that we carry on into our adulthood. And some of those tapes was, yo, keep your mouth quiet. You got to do time, do time. Do your time in a way that is integral to keep your mouth shut, but if anybody move on you, you make sure that's the last time they move on anybody. You know, all of those things. I'm a super duper confident person. I take on the mentality if there's something that needs to be tackled and there's only a few of us willing to do it, that few of us are gonna win against the majority. So that's my mindset. Again, it comes back from having 8 brothers, 4 sisters. I'm the middle child.
Middle child, okay.
So when it was time to argue and fight, yo, who's wearing the jeans that day? Who got the Pumas this day? Nah, I'm going to get those. I'm going to negotiate. If the negotiation fail, I'm going to come up with creative ways to make sure you're not wearing those jeans that day. I got the Pumas that day. And all these little things, again, our minds are sponges, so we're taking on these things, and when that mind tricks us out to say, wow, that was successful, you repeat that kind of success. You repeat that kind of practice. Gotcha. You know, so being on Nashua Street after living through Rikers Island, I was like, what is this really?
Yeah. So what's your education level at that point? 17 years old in Nashua Street. Did you graduate high school?
Nah.
Did you get your GED upstate in New York?
No, I did not graduate high school. I bought a fake GED in New York to put in my folder.
Okay.
You know, I bought.
Wow.
It's funny. They were selling GEDs.
Gotcha.
You know,
inside of the
joint. And Shasha to be. I remember it as clear as day. It's like you need more certificates in your folder. So I was always a real good student, bro. I mean, a real good student. My mother preached education. She was illiterate. She came from down south, Manor, South Carolina, where she was very young, 15. My father was 17. Didn't have much education at all. So she understood that education was the necessary means for complete liberation. Liberation of the mind, liberation out of poverty, so on and so forth. She wanted better for her children, so she would always push that message. And my mother returned to the essence or died pursuing her GED. So that meant that lady studied for her GED, bro. From the time I was, I can, from as early as I can remember until the time she died, because she pushed that process of education on us. So I always paid attention to in school. I got good grades in school. High school, my mind just shut off. After football season was over, streets had me. Now I'm thinking about social media before there was a social media. The messages that were projected in my young, undeveloped mind was coming in the 1980s when brothers are showing up in school like it's forget a fashion show. You know, brothers was pulling up in school in M3s,
right.
190Es. You know, like, okay. You know, my parents were strict, so we had curfew and all that other stuff. I'm like, I need to be out there. You know, so my mind shut off after my freshman year in high school.
Gotcha.
I mean, I really couldn't take anything in it. I was like, yo, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
Then when the opportunity came to get money, I took it because I wanted to get an apartment so I could do what I wanted to do. And that was the end of my traditional educational track.
Right.
But as a young 5%er, you know, the message is always taught to us that reading is fun, the mental. Reading is fun for your mental. So I was always reading. Just hearing the older guards speak, just hearing the sisters speak, they were so intelligent and so wise. Again, being sponges, I'm taking in all these things. So the science of supreme mathematics really is the formula that allowed me to really get through knowledge, to know, look, listen, observe. So if I go to prison for the first time, I'm going to fall back. I'm going to do the knowledge. I'm going to look, I'm going to listen, I'm going to observe, but I'm going to ultimately respect what my mind tells me is right and exact, or what my mind tells me is off. And then I'm going to move accordingly. I'm going to move towards it, or I'm going to move away from it. And that's what informed how I moved.
Okay. Was that something you were brought up in your family under that?
Indeed. My oldest brother can do. At the time, I didn't know he was always locked up, but I didn't know he was locked up. He was in juvenile lockup, upstate New York, Lincoln Hall, Sparfit, Lincoln Hall. I would miss my brother. He was my hero.
Yeah.
I would miss my brother. Then when I found out why he was gone from me, this is funny. I was like, man, I don't want to be nothing like that dude. Because I was hurt.
Right. You took it personal.
I took it personal. It was the loss of a hero. I was hurt. I was like, man, I don't want to be nothing like that dude. But I became just like him and went 10 times harder than he did.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely.
So I learned from him when he came home from a stay at Lincoln Hall, upstate New York, juvenile detention. Let's call it 1983.
Okay.
Him, my cousin Born Master, my cousin Justice Born, it was in my bedroom, and they were having what we call a cipher.
Why do you keep doing that? I'm gonna turn that off. My apologies, man.
No
so you
worries.
was in that bedroom.
Right, they were having what we call a cipher, and just the way the brothers would speak had me really mesmerized by the rhythm of how they were talking as they were sharing on over their Supereme mathematics. So it was something that was always burnt in my mind. And they came back to me when I needed them the most.
I'm gonna turn that shit off.
Right? They came.
All right, my bad.
No worries, brother.
I just understood that. So when you need it the most, I take it you mean when you
I was in that hole, right?
Okay, so this before we get to the whole Nashua Street, how long are you there? At any point, are you considering trial? You got a paid lawyer? Kind of break that down for me.
Went down. At a point, I was like, we're going to the hoop with this. We got this, you know. But I don't know if I didn't share when I got hit when I got charged for killing the brother whose life I took. Simultaneously, my crew got hit by the feds. Then I got caught up in the superseding and federal indictment. So here are two tracks that's going on. The first trial, it was 51 co-defendants in a CCE, career criminal enterprise, right? It was 50 of us, but there was only 12 of us that was really the team. So a lot of people began to do trading with the government. And increasingly, those people were some of those 12 that were with the team. So they had broke us up into 3 trials, 5, and 2. I went in the second wave of 5, but once the first 5 went, one of the brothers, Michael Waite, he said, man, I want to talk about the homicide in the state. So I went from no witnesses to 12. Again, I was guilty. Talked to my co-defendant. We accept responsibility for it. Took the sentence of 15 to life. That sentence ran concurrent with my sentence of 14 years in the feds. So coming back to your question, research your question about that whole process.
Well, I wanted to know too. A paid lawyer, I take it.
Oh,
you
yeah,
had as well?
right.
Or?
I had private counsel that because my team got hit, we didn't pay for them. When my team got hit, the so-called homies that was my partners, they hit my apartment, and everybody went like this.
Gotcha.
Everybody went like that.
So talk about like the feds. You're going to federal court and all that stuff too.
Right.
Throughout the whole time.
So I'm going to state court and the federal court. Sadly, I don't know why. Federal court just seemed like a more straightforward process. They would say things and I can comprehend what was being said. Federal court, I have no clue of what was going on. I wasn't aware of the sentencing guidelines.
State court compared to federal.
Yeah, state court compared to federal court. And I remember when I was getting sentenced, I said, no, I want to plead guilty because I want to run that case with this one. And we were going in for the sentencing. I just remember them having this conversation that I felt I wasn't a part of it, but my life, what was in the balance. And they were talking about the point-based sentence, which they no longer do. And they were like, we're taking 2 points off for this and 4 points, we'll add 4. And I felt like a sucker because I didn't understand. And I said, I never want to be in a position where I don't understand what the hell's going on, especially when they're speaking English. You know, that was the difference in the federal system. And that was something that was really in my mind. I felt like I couldn't see what was going on with my own life. I felt like I didn't understand what was happening to me in real time. And it didn't feel good. It didn't feel good at all. You know, so I understood that I need to know everything about everything that involves me from that point.
Did you have much say in the matter of if you went to the feds or state? Did you want to do state, and how were you able to kind of get the federal? Because you would think the federal would supersede, county, state supersede. So
it's actually the reverse.
Is it?
Because it was a homicide.
Gotcha.
And this was drug trafficking.
Copy.
The state had that charge superseded this charge. But they did give me the option to go to the feds. I chose to stay because of my co-defendant. My co-defendant, his case was dismissed because of his age, and my co-defendant is also my cousin. And again, family.
Yeah.
You know, so I stayed.
Goes back to that. federal usually results in some sort of federal probation. Is that something that you had to deal with
Indeed,
eventually?
I had 5 years supervised release.
Okay.
So lifetime parole, 5 years supervised release.
Okay, so just kind of walk me through that journey in Massachusetts State. At this time, Concord is classification. Do you even see Concord because you pled out to a second? I
So
take
at that
it.
time, Walpole was classification.
Okay, it was
Right,
Walpole.
right. Walpole was classification. You go through Walpole, you get your W number. You're right, Luke. You go to Walpole, you get your W number. You go to Concord, you get classed, you get shipped.
Okay.
So that's how you're
In
right.
your situation, what, back to Walpole?
I got
the max?
shipped to actually, I got classed to Norfolk.
Okay.
I got classed to Norfolk. I landed in Norfolk 1992, about February, March 1992. One of my co-defendants was there. He was able to like really get me again, coming growing up. When I say my co-defendants, these are also my next door neighbors. These are the big homies that I grew up knowing that I had to respect, knowing I had to listen to.
Okay.
So he, at that time, he was the first one of the so-called New York boys who was incarcerated in Massachusetts. He was already doing time for drug trafficking. So I went to the prison that he was in, and he's just giving me an orientation about how to do time. And it went back to how they taught us how to do time on Rikers Island in upstate New York. He was fully into programs, the Norfolk Resident Council. He was the chairman of the fatherhood group, and he was just someone that that community looked to for counsel and advice. So he was like, yo, I need your help doing this. What are we doing? We're going to paint picnic tables. Okay, that's the big homie. We're going to go paint picnic tables. Yo, we're doing this event. I need you to show. All right, we're doing this event. I'm going to show. And when I got kicked out of Norfolk because I wasn't ready for it, the moment guidance was taken out, I mean, I'm left to my own volition, I had unfortunately beat somebody up very, very bad that caused me to get moved out of that prison. You know, I beat somebody up very bad, caused me to get moved out of that prison. But I didn't think about it like I was losing anything.
Right.
Because again, the undeveloped mind, not understanding consequences. I'm like, the next prison I went to Walpole was Walpole, and it was like, all right. For me, unfortunately, I was too stupid to realize, yo, this is the story Walpole prison that they wrote about. This is the legendary Walpole prison. Because I did time on Rikers Island and Elmira and went through a riot while upstate that lasted 5 hours and seeing all the gruesome shit that a young person should never see while incarcerated, while living, period. I wasn't smart enough to understand, yo, brother, you're in a very dangerous environment.
When does that realization hit in Walpole?
I don't think it ever hit.
Okay.
I don't think it ever hit because of how it was hardwired. Again, there's a lesson that I learned as a 5-year-old that stayed with me my whole entire life. And I was born in Brooklyn. However, my family moved to Queens when I was 5. And my mom was preparing me and 2 of my brothers to go outside and play. And I remember my mother said, go outside and play and make friends. And she was dressing us up, getting us ready to go out. But what she said next scared the shit out of me and put me on alert. She said, and she said it in a way that I never heard my mother speak before that or since that. She said, go outside and play. She says, but if anybody ever spits on you or puts your foot on you, you pick something up and you knock their head out. And with that message delivered to my mind was fight. Fight, fight, fight. So having heart, having a mother's instruction, and let's be clear, no mother should give that message without context.
Right.
Somebody, the first law of nature is self-preservation. I mean, somebody puts their hands on you, you have a right to defend yourself. But it was that message at such a young age that didn't have context. I wouldn't learn probably 40, 44, 42 years later. Why? I asked my mom, why did you tell me that? And my mother shared with me that her mother her mother's mother was born on a slave plantation. And she's seen all those dehumanizing things happen to her family, her peers. And she shared that with her children, and they shared it with their children. They eventually shared it with my mother, and that was her way of sharing it with us. Wow. You know, and it took me years because I was, like I'm saying, through the knowledge, being in prison, I learned to slow down and look at, how did I get here? How did I get here? Why am I here? So those questions, just reflecting, a lot of times, instances like that will come up. Instances like that will come up. You know, I had to actually do an exercise in a program, and it was called Your Timeline. And we had to identify 8 to 10 episodes that were pivotal in our lives that shifted our thinking. And that was one of my earliest childhood memories. So that was how my mind is wired. You know, my mind is still wired to fight, but now I know why I'm fighting. Who is not necessarily but a it. We're fighting broken criminal legal systems. Why? Because a broken criminal legal system is informed by a broken human mind that also needs to be healed. And those human minds just happen to be powerful white men that have inherited generations of power and are part of codified systems that says you dehumanize or other people for your benefit. So understanding these things and wanting to reverse that polarity and no longer be a part of that process, because at a point, I can't sleep with my ops. Right. And sleeping with my ops is carrying on the same behavior of a broken system and broken minds of the men and women who are in these seats of power. If I'm going to reverse that polarity, I can't operate as a micro actor in a micro system that's replicating the macro of systemic harms. Gotcha. You know.
Okay, so you get up to Walpole. Is this where you end up going to the hole for 5 years?
Yes.
Okay, so what leads up to that? How does that happen? How do you get? Is it just one day shit goes down?
So there was a person got killed inside of the prison. An individual who had 100 indictments said, "I know who did it." Individual, I'm gonna leave that alone. Individual said, "I know who did it." He named myself and my co-defendant because we weren't from Boston. We didn't have all those relationships that connected people. So we were easy targets for him to use as scapegoats. So about 5 months after that indictment, they threw it out. Wow. They said, this guy got 100 indictments in this very same county, and there was no proof, there was no mitigating factors that say this man and this man committed that murder. Okay. You know, so that's how I landed in the hole. I stayed in the hole for 5 years. I had to file a lawsuit to get out of the hole.
So they charge you with murder while incarcerated or something like that? And you did get indicted and you had to eventually go to court, but eventually got dismissed.
Right, we had one court appearance. Okay. And it got dismissed shortly thereafter. But again, the broken nature of our criminal legal system. They knew the case got dismissed, but they threw my co-defendant and myself in the hole and kept us there for 5 years.
Is that because the burden of proof may be different in court as opposed to the institution could find you guilty of any ticket? Or like what was their reasoning or justification for keeping you in the hole for?
And that's a question you have to ask them.
Really? So you were just as lost?
Right. Not necessarily lost, but to really get an answer to that, you have to ask the individuals that did it. But what I surmised was that here you are with a broken system, a system that's all about control. We can't take the L of saying, yo, we did this, but they reversed it. But we're going to have our own justice. That was the same exact reality going to the parole board. Damn. Same exact reality going to the parole board. I had 5 parole hearings. 5. Wow. I was sentenced to 15 to life. So I did that sentence twice. Wow. And our parole regulation says that our parole board is there not to re-adjudicate a case, but to see if a person has moved towards rehabilitation and incapacitation is no longer necessary, right, on two of its prongs, right? I had demonstrated that I had long since moved to rehabilitation. Not simply because I said so, because during some of those parole hearings, in particular my second parole hearing, my first parole hearing, I expected to get a 5-year setback. They gave me a 4.
Kind of status quo.
Right,
Yeah.
the status quo, they gave me a 4. I was shocked. I just kept doing what I was doing. And when I went back after those 4 years, they gave me a 2. But 2 of the members voted to release me, saying that this man is rehabilitated, and they stated my record, which I really wasn't paying attention to at that time. When I'm going to use a nice statement, and if it fits, people step into those shoes. I, at that point, was working overtime, triple time, to repair the harm that I caused in my community.
Okay.
So that meant the community that I was now living in, prison is no different than any other community anywhere in the world. I had to pay that forward.
How were you doing that?
I was doing that through peer mentorship, grabbing the brothers younger than me. I was doing that by creating programs. I created my first program in 1998. I was doing that by showing up differently. A lot of people look to me, yo, that's the big homie Supereme. Yo, he's one of them New York boys. I move quietly. And I always say, in silence is a great strength. And my strength was my demonstration. A lot of the young bros used to be like, bro, how did you change? How did you, how are you? Because they wanted to show up differently. So that's how I was paying it forward. Serving in the African Heritage Coalition since 1999, being a part of a team that created a speechcraft that got adopted by Toastmasters International called Speaking Without Fear. Shout out to David Ortiz, Kenny Seguin, Wayne Grant, and David Talbert. Those were the co-creators of that speechcraft. We created a program, Wayne Grant, Kenny Seguin, Steve Magruder, and myself. This is your cycle of anger, you know. And so I was also, I know now that they call it an event planner.
Right.
I was responsible as the chairman of the African Heritage Coalition of hosting annually Kwanzaa, Black History Month, MLK, and Juneteenth. Those are all transferable skills with real world application. Now I started doing all these things in 1999 at Old Colony.
Okay. And
they just kept going. Every prison I was, yo, Preem's here.
Word.
Preem's got it. Let's go. Preem's got it. So that's what I was doing. That's how I was showing up. And then the program that I think had the most impact was, again, a response to violence inside of the prison. Now, for me, I know the reason why I was in prison because of violence. My mission now, Luke, is how do I stop the violence? And I remember having this conversation with a brother, OG, my man OG. I'm going to name him because most people don't know how this brother's mind worked. And he was a brother who was all the way in. So I like to move on the ground. I like to interact with people one-on-one before I interact with them in a group setting. So knowing that there was a problem, knowing that I'm working on something, I'm developing a program in my mind, but I'm also doing empirical study by having one-on-one interviews. See, sometimes we don't know what we're doing when we're doing until we do know. So I know now, this is all these things, this is what I'm doing, right? So in this one interview with brother OG, shout out to OG at Uncornered, because now the brother's really in that work. He said, Supereme, listen, I'm with you. He said, man, we can't stop the violence. I'm like, damn. He said, yo, but if we can reduce it by 1%, we did our job. That was one of those pivotal moments in my life. I'm like, oh, shit. The ones we think are not paying attention are the ones that are paying attention the most.
That 1% matters.
That 1% matters.
Facts.
I was like, wow. You know, so there was a riot in 2010 at MCI Norfolk, Massachusetts' largest prison. At the time, it was a population of 1,600. The Norfolk Resident Council is like the flagship activity in that prison. But to keep it a whole buck, the council had been broken maybe 25 years prior to this riot.
Wow.
You know, and what's so beautiful, when you study and you research, you learn. So the visionary mind of the Norfolk Resident Council is Howard B. Gill, a Harvard-trained businessman who got recruited from D.C. to come up with a new kind of carceral system. And he came up with the vision for community prison, which would have a shared responsibility between its residents and the administration. And he called it the Norfolk Resident Council. The Norfolk Resident Council is an electoral body. It has 3 chairmen, a white chairman, a black chairman, a Latino chairman, a committees coordinator who coordinates the activities of 11 standing committees. Those committees range from a finance committee to an athletic committee with education, food, and all types of stuff in between. Then you have an executive secretary who coordinates the affairs of the 24 unit representatives, 24 housing units at MCI Norfolk. Each of them have a unit representative. Every Tuesday, the same way the State House comes together to legislate, every Tuesday the Norfolk Resident Council comes together to legislate. Wow. We pass bills that we make proposals for expenditures of real money. The Norfolk MA Council gets an annual operating budget of $24,000, which is the budget that's codified in the Department of Corrections budget for leisure, recreation and leisure time activity. Okay. They just let us play with it. They just let us play with it. They allow us to make recommendations on how that money is going to be spent. I thought this was such a unique and such a super dope way to get ready for society. Yeah. So Howard B. Gill, he wrote back in 1929, 1931, that the Norfolk Resident Council should not dissuade even a gang member from getting involved with its process. However, when the gang member begins to bring gang activities, or when the gangster begins to bring gangster activities, or when someone begins to bring activities that are not the governing mechanism of the MA Council, that the council should have a mechanism to get rid of that person. I said, that's pretty fair. You mean to tell me that I can get elected by a group of my peers, and then I can go and sit at the superintendent's desk and negotiate on behalf of the community? Yeah. It's like, whoa.
You don't see that often.
You don't see that often, right? And we should see it more. Because participating in that body, when that riot took place, I felt like us as the executive committee of the MA Council, we wasn't doing enough. We lost connection with those who mattered the most, those in the streets. And by the streets, I mean those in the yard who weren't going to programs, who weren't enrolled in colleges. So that was my focus, always staying on the ground, talking to the young people, because I was that young person who came to prison because of violence. So when that riot happened, I felt guilty, I felt ashamed, I felt like I let my little brothers down. So I got busy. I said, damn, Preem, you are responsible for this. So I did a one-man survey in that prison. I spoke to the Italian mob, the Irish gangsters, the national gangs, all the impact players from the city of Boston, and every stop in between. I'm like, bro, we have to make this place a safe prison. And I appealed to what we all wanted, our freedom. We could not get to a place of being free in an environment that kept popping off. Because that means every time something happened, the next time it could happen closer to home. So B. Luke's my guy. Something happened to B. Luke. Now, you touch one of mine. I want to touch one of yours. Yeah. But what is lost in that process is that B. Luke got a family. He got dreams. He got aspirations. And that's where my mind was already at. And I was like, okay, how do I get others to see this? Yeah. How do I get others to see it? So when that riot happened, for me, it was no longer trying to figure it out. It was just hitting it head on. So I spoke to everybody in that camp, including the correctional officers, union. I had a really good relationship with Sergeant McCullough, a brother from Brooklyn. I said, Mac, I need to talk to somebody in the union. He took off his hat, took off his shades. He said, Supereme, what's up? Let him know what I had in mind. He said, wait right here. He went and delivered Lieutenant Haynes, who was the union steward, in that auditorium, the foyer of the auditorium leading to the CSD building, and we chopped it up. And he said, before you say anything, he's like, this is the Lieutenant Haynes. He said, I know who all the heavies are in this camp. He said, right now, there's really something's happened. This prison is not made for this. He said, but if one of mine gets touched, they could put you guys on transport vehicles. You will get touched. I said, I respect that. I said, the same way you care about your brothers, the same way I care about my fellow peers in this community. And then we talked, and he said, we'll support your proposal. That proposal was written. I wrote the proposal. It was written, the heading of the proposal was Building Community Through Restorative Justice, a public safety initiative for the residents of NCI Norfolk. Now, only reading and studying what I know at the time, that public safety is something that we all have in common. Yeah. The superintendent and us on the ground. The proposal got greenlit. I requested for them to have a summit of leadership. Now I'm talking to the brothers in leadership that have titles president, chairman, coordinator, facilitator, so on and so on and so forth. I invited 5 black brothers, 5 Latino brothers, 5 white brothers, and 2 Asian brothers into a summit of leadership and let them know, listen, here's the proposal I told you about. We got the green light. This is not going to be easy, but it will be simple. And what's simple about it, we just got to be consistent. We got to be squeaky clean. We got to say we are who we are. Anytime you're building something new, there's going to be attrition. From those 17 men, only 4 inside men held fast to that call. That's Tommy Kuntz, who is one of the first brothers in the last 30, 35 years to receive a commutation by the governor. Peter Cantos, Johnny Keegan, and Louis Costa. Together, gotcha. Those brothers, our external coordinators was Dr. Karen Lachinsky and Daria Lyman, who was a fellow at the UMass Boston Global School of World Democracy and Peace. These are the co-founders of what became the Transformational Prison Project. Okay. We couldn't say that we were the Transformational Prison Project on the inside. Right. The bag would have been over. But we understood that what we were building was not for the inside of the prison. It was a pathway for us to come home and do the work that we're doing now. Yeah. And in order to do that, this is 2012, after our first annual conference that we called the Restorative Justice Day of Responsibility Conference, a multi-day conference inside of that prison, which we're now importing out into the community for the first time. We realized that they were going to come for that program because we crossed every line of demarcation that the causal system said was not to be crossed. White brothers and black brothers should not be working together. Latin kings and La Familias should not be working together. Christians and 5%ers should not be working together. The motto was all of us or none of us. And I had enough positive influence to leverage those relationships into an organizing mechanism that produced the restorative justice movement inside of Massachusetts Department of Correction. Amazing. That work was covered in print by the New York Times, the Huffington Post, the Christian Science Monitor, the Boston Globe. Roger Ross Williams, an award-winning filmmaker from CNN, sits on all these boards for Cannes Film Festival. He brought a film crew to film for 2 days. Wow. And the focus was always on our young people, because that was the incision point that became a gateway for men to come home, showing that we are not incorrigible, that our minds can be, there is no rehabilitation process in Massachusetts, so I struggle saying rehabilitated. Because it was, Luke learned something, Luke touched Supreme. Supreme learned something, Luke and Supreme touched another one. So we had a habilitation process inside of the Massachusetts Department of Correction that has become their flagship program.
That's amazing.
But they couldn't have a black person who they deemed all types of incorrigible running it. So 9.5 years later, after building this in this community, they moved me out of the prison without due process. Without due process to Shirley Medium, one of the worst prisons.
Yeah. Damn.
And it was like, here I am with 0 points, my man. This objective-based classification system predicated on your score with 0 points, serving a life bid in my upper 40s at the time. All the demographic that's saying he's not a threat, he is not a security threat, was wiped out. You put me in a spot where perhaps the largest gang activity outside of the max was pervasive.
They say that that's pretty much just the stepping stone to the max,
That's
is what I'm
stepping stone to
hearing.
the
I've
max.
never been to Shirley Medium. When does the education come? You bought your GED. Do you eventually get a real GED?
I think it's real GED, brother. Thank you.
And then college as well, right?
Right. I got my GED. That was one of the first things. Now, the lessons of what the older brothers taught me in New York are ticking in due programming. So when I got to New York, that lesson was reinforced by my educator, Freedom, my mentor, Freedom. I got my GED. I started in Norfolk, finished it in Walpole. And I must say, bro, it was one of the most special moments in my life. Because my mother always said, get your education, get your education. I achieved that not only for me, but for her as well. And when she learned of that accomplishment, I know I brought so much joy to my life after bringing so much harm, so much joy to her life, rather, after bringing so much harm into it.
Wow.
So shortly thereafter that, while in Walpole, I enrolled in Mount Wachusett Community College at Walpole, and then President Bill Clinton got elected and wiped out the Pell Grants.
Wow.
And that's shortly after that, the 5 years, and coming out now with a mind of reparation, giving back for the harm that I caused, where I'm at in my prison community, but also leading by example. So they wiped out the Pell Grant. I talked to my father. I told him I wanted to do a corresponding accounting course with Stratford Career Institute. So I took a college level accounting course, achieved that. I went into culinary art, achieved that. I got my barber's license, achieved that. I got my public speaking certification through Toastmasters, achieved that. Now that I'm writing, there's no more programs to me. Now I got to create them.
Wow.
Now I got to create programs that are culturally competent. And a lot of that creation came from dealing with brothers on one-on-ones. We used to call it, yo, let's kick it.
Yeah.
But we was building constructive relationships. I know now what I was doing was really facilitating the process of knowledge itself with my brothers. As I did that with myself as a hurt person, I was daring greatly to ask these brothers, yo, how you feeling today, man? I don't want to hear that shit. I'm all right. What does all right feel like? You know, how you really feeling? And having those conversations and smiling. Smiling, that was one of the things when I first came upstate, I wasn't smiling.
Right.
And I wasn't smiling because of Coogee Rap song.
Okay.
Coogee Rap saying ain't nobody smiling on Rikers Island. The same way that I had to undo all these old tapes. Now my co-defendant, my man Big H, was like, he's not my co-defendant, my man. He's like, yo, bro, smile a little. He said, well, every time you take pictures and send to your family, you like this.
Yeah, right.
I was like, you got a point there. He got a laugh on me, so I started smiling.
Okay.
And it feels good to smile. It feels good to smile. Like, you're not going to break me in here. You're not going to break me. You got my body, but you'll never have my mind. That's where my freedom resides in. And that was the message that I was giving to so many men over those 33 years of incarceration. A lot who are out in the community, leading their own nonprofits, leading their own businesses, advocates or organizers across this Commonwealth. You know, so when I say to officials, yo, I'm an expert in what I do. So Supreme, how are you an expert in reentry? You just came home. Nah, I was running a reentry process that I intentionally kept away from y'all because y'all steal everything from us. One off. When you do it twice, it happens once as an isolated incident. It happens twice as a pattern. It happens 3 times intentionally. But when it happens to 10s, 20 men, that's not only changing their lives, but changing the trajectory of their families' lives and their community, we got something.
Yeah.
So that's why I pop my shit. Yeah, I am an expert. I'm going to pop that shit, not begging you for a seat at your table. I want to show and prove to you why I need a seat at your table if you're serious about corrections in Massachusetts, if you're serious about rehabilitation in Massachusetts, if you're serious about the public health of this great commonwealth and the public safety of our cities. You're going to talk to experts, subject matter experts. And our lived experience, not just having a story about our adverse childhood experience, about our traumas, but we went through a school of higher education in there, not the academy, but just building, just like Socrates did on the streets. And he got persecuted for it too. But that's what it is, just building with people, building with the beauty of the human heart and the human mind and getting to learn each other. So I did go to Mount Wachusett. They wiped out the Pell Grant, but I made a promise to my mother that I would go to college. So as a community builder and a program developer, I didn't have a lot of time to study every time the entrance exam came, but I didn't stop. I always took the entrance exam at Norfolk. I was told I passed the first time, but they wanted to see me get my score high. I was like, all right, whatever. But I kept failing the math afterwards. So when I got kicked out of there, I went to Shirley. When I went to Shirley, Tufts University, actually Dr. Hurley Bender, she was doing the Inside Out program, and she had just started a semester-long lecture series. And I attended every one of those lectures, and the whole time I'm remembering two things, my promise to my mother and my spiritual father. Both said education, 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 education. I took the entrance exam for Tufts University. I'm proud to say I passed the entrance exam. I received an interview. I got accepted as one of the first members of their bachelor's program at MCI Shirley.
Wow.
Celebration short-lived. They abruptly moved that program out of Shirley to Concord. Now, remember all of this, Luke, I'm doing all of this simultaneously. I've just started building a program at Shirley that had nothing. So I created a community with people nobody wanted to touch. So when they heard that I could possibly be going to Concord, they were running up on my homie Big E from New York, and he was like, yo, tell Supereme don't go to Concord. They was like, I can't tell him that. He made a promise to his mother, but it touched me, bro. So I said, I got to do this in a restorative justice way. I had a circle with them. I said, I want y'all to say exactly how y'all feel. Should I go to should I get transferred to Concord to go to school? They was like, Preem, we're not. I said, no, brother. We're a community. We built a relationship. I want to know how you feel. I cannot abruptly come into your life and abruptly leave that quick. Them brothers, bro, they told me, Supreme, if you leave, I'm not coming back to the program. You're the reason why I'm coming here, so on and so on and so forth. So I said I couldn't leave. I was willing to risk fulfilling the promise I made to my mother and my spiritual father. But something beautiful happened, bro. There's a statement, one of my favorite quotes, MLK quotes. He said, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. About 6 months later, Boston College came to Shirley.
Wow.
I applied for that and got in as one of the first members of that inaugural cohort.
Okay, nice.
So I had my cake and I ate it too.
That's dope.
You know, and that's that's the message that I'd like to share with brothers. Yo, dream. Dream, and don't count time in the fulfillment of that dream. If it doesn't happen here, be consistent, be patient. That's how I win, brother. Consistency and patience. You're not going to outwork me, and you're not going to outlast me. When you quit, I'm working. When you think at the time, they're not trying to hear it right now, I'm working. They didn't approve this proposal, guess what? We'll do it in the yard. You know, so I love who I am because of that. I did so much harm in the streets. I did so much harm to not just the people I did harm to. I negatively impacted their families, their communities. And I'm my mother's son, I'm my father's son, I'm my spiritual father's son. And they told me, man, that's not right and exact, bro. If you do something wrong, you stand up, you apologize for it, and you begin to repair that harm. And the way you repair harm, the best way to elucidate, to illustrate, to exemplify an apology is by doing the work. And that's where I'm at.
And like how you said, don't give up. Like KG says, man, anything is possible, man. And I really believe in that. And speaking of anything being possible, eventually parole comes up. You're an expert at reentry. You get a chance to reenter society yourself. So just talk about that last time at the parole board. What happens?
So here's the last time at the parole board, bro. It was the moral arc of the universe bending towards justice, because it was my bros that came. Mm-hmm. It was brothers that I mentored decades ago that went home and been home. Jamal Warner, One Love Sports Academy. Sean Ellis of the Trial 4 Netflix documentary. My bro Colin Harris. My elder Tamari Allah. Pastor Dickinson. My community came and got me. And they told him, yo, y'all got to let him go. Enough's enough. Mm-hmm. Y'all don't know who this man is. Y'all do not know who this man is. And that was the first time that the parole board actually looked at who the hell I was. And it was evident through that hearing. Mm-hmm. It was evident through that hearing. And I had told myself this, that I'm guilty, so I don't need to hire a lawyer to go into the parole. I'm guilty. Why am I hiring a lawyer? You hire a lawyer to defend yourself. It was a mistake.
That's it.
It was really a mistake, because the system is not playing fair. If they think you're alone, they're going to treat you like you're alone. Wow. When they know your community is with you, then they're going to know who you are. I'll never forget, as they're going through the process, now they're reading who I am. Mm-hmm. They're like, you did this? You are the person who created that? I didn't know this. How are you not going to know this when this is written in every petition for parole release? Wow. You know, when one member said, I want to apologize to you. This is my third time hearing your case. I made a mistake 2 times. You should have never done another day in prison. I was like, I've always said I'm not going to get out of prison a day before I'm supposed to or a day after. And I was comfortable living in that reality, because there's so much work to do in the space of rehabilitation that's not being done, that one of my elders say, Supreme, you know why they don't want to let you out of prison? Because you're doing their job for them. We were their program directors. We were their deputy of reentry. We was doing the work, and I couldn't stop doing the work because I could not stop caring for people. Mm-hmm. As much as they was like, Luke, I'm having arguments with my wife, with my family. Stop doing programs. They don't want to let you out because you're doing all that. Wow. And I'm like, yeah, I don't get it.
But you eventually do get out.
But I eventually do get out.
Talk about what you've been up to since you've been out. I know we met at the graduation.
Graduation, right. So just the graduation, bro. When I started junior high school, I told you about the large family I come from. You know, see, I'm getting like animated and excited just thinking about it. Because it was a process getting there. When I started junior high school, the dean, Mr. Savidio, he called me into his office and he told me, I'm going to make sure you don't graduate. First day of school. Damn. He said, you're a Hilton. I made sure your other brothers didn't graduate. My brothers were problems. Mm-hmm. That wasn't me, though. Right. That wasn't me. I got through school, straight A student. On the eve of my junior high school graduation, my man suspended me. Broke my little heart, bro. I had 3 best friends. We all dated 4 girls that were best friends. Man, we planned this thing out. Damn. Man, it was one of those formative stages of a child's life, bro, that even when I think about it, because I know that I'm not the only one that shit happened to. So during graduation, I'm like, yeah, Mr. Savidio, look at me now. Tufts University. That's just graduation number 1. I have 7 classes left at Boston College. Graduation number 2. Nice. Right? So it was like a full circle moment of, yo, you're not going to outlast me.
That's it.
You're not going to outlast me. And the reason why you're not going to outlast me, because I'm not living for me. I'm living for us. And that self-defined us is all of us who have accepted responsibility for harm we cause and really want to stand up and get busy reversing that historical track record and laying a new path. You had my colleagues, man, and my brothers on your show a couple of weeks back, Brother Spit, Brother Ali, and Brother Brazy. And I love when Quintel Spit, he says, yo, gang. And that's what the mission is always about, Lou. We're going to reverse the polarity of what's cool, and we're going to show you what's really cool. We're going to show you what's really lit. We're going to show you what it's really about. Now, instead of trafficking cocaine, we traffic across Tufts University, Boston College, BU, Emerson College, Mount Wachusett. We're trafficking in higher education. And we're doing it because we want to do it.
Why is it important to you?
Man, is it important? Education is a necessary means. Again, all those childhood lessons. Sometimes you take, not sometimes, life, it takes time to internalize lessons we receive as a child and to get understanding from it. Understanding comes in time. So understanding the value of education. Education comes from that Latin word adducere, which means to pull out, to extract. Bro, education allows us to hit triggers that allow what's in us to unfold and come out of us. And then I have this outer body of experience like, oh shit, I am intelligent. Oh shit, I can do that. Oh shit, I didn't even need that to accomplish this. But you know what? This is fun. I want to go get that because I'm on a mission to undo that. And we need brilliant thinkers that can become thought partners and thought leaders. Right now, there's a revolution brewing in Massachusetts, bro, that is the second coming of the Great American Revolution. The Bible says, man, that you will sojourn in prison for 10 days. You will come out, and you will be the new leaders. Wow. So I'm living in again, self-fulfilling prophecy and then prophecy somebody else talked about. Because I'm seeing guys win. I'm seeing our sisters are also coming out of prison winning. So it allows me to dream bigger now. I'm a visionary mind. It allows me to see more, allows me to see the possibilities. But now they're no longer just possibilities. It's all a matter of time. When are we going to accomplish this? When are we going to achieve this? And what's so beautiful about it is that process that I'm not going to tell you about, because as an expert in reentry, as an expert in restorative justice, you pay experts to give you expert advice. You pay experts to tell you, share with you rather, what type of programs you should be using. Pay us as experts. Because we're going to keep creating these jobs on our own. Absolutely. And we're going to keep serving a population that is unserved. And it extends. You incarcerate a woman, you incarcerate an entire family. You incarcerate a man, you're incarcerating the protector of that family. We don't want our families unprotected. I don't want my family unprotected. I don't want my community harmed. In fact, I don't want your community harmed. Because if harm hits your community, it's only a matter of time before it trickles in mine. And these are the things. So education is important because it allows us to see the possibilities. It allows us to be possibility. I thought it was so dope. I think it's so dope I was a freshman at 48, right? And I smile and I laugh at it.
Hey, never
it's
too late
dope.
to do great is what I say.
Never too late to do great. It was dope. I'm like, I'm fulfilling a dream. So when you talk about that question of what I've been doing on this reentry process, my biggest reentry hurdle was receiving a standard state ID. Right? I talked to so-and-so. So I talked to, I don't know how many state representatives, how many state senators. Like, yeah, we make calls, but we can't do anything. We do what we always do. We figure it out. So it took me 9.5 months to get a standard state ID after doing time for 33 years in the Massachusetts Department of Correction, when not only was I doing time, but these same state representatives, same state senators, same community leaders, same religious leaders were coming into that prison because I'm inviting them in there. You know exactly who I am. Somebody couldn't pick up a call. Hey, this is who he is. Yeah, that document may be missing, but we know who he is. He needs to onboard his life out here. You can't get a job without an ID.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. And then sometimes probation's up your ass about getting a job. And you're like, what do you want me to do?
again, bending to the universe. If I don't show up the way I show up, if I didn't train myself to show up the way I show up as respectable, as a man who's moves through integrity, who's transparent, and who stands on business, my parole officer would not have been supportive of me. He was really a guiding light, like, yo, we got to get this done. It wasn't get this done.
Right.
He's
Or
like,
else.
how do we get this done? Right. So his support was monumental in this process. Getting a document that costs $16, my birth certificate from New York, had cost me close to $4,000 from travel expenses. Money I didn't have because I didn't have a job.
Right.
Had it not been for my wife and my community, my circle of support and accountability, none of this wouldn't get done. So this is why I tell you how important community is. They said, Supreme, you've been serving us for all these decades. What do you need, bro? We got you. Don't worry about that. That was my only reentry barrier. Other than that, it's been smooth. Our first restorative justice curriculum, our tagline was living out our reentry through restorative justice. So that's how I lived while I was incarcerated, like I was already home.
Right.
I was in the G League practicing for the league.
You have to, yeah.
That's exactly how we have to show up. I couldn't, in good conscious thinking, throw a piece of paper on the floor. I'm like, nah, bro, I don't want trash in my hood. Pick that up, that go in there.
Yeah.
And the longer we know it, you start practicing, other people start seeing what you practice, and more people start doing it. And it don't look so bad. Right. So since I've been home, wow, where do I start?
I know you had mentioned on your graduation speech about housing being important because, you know, some people, 33 years, you might lose everybody and you have nowhere to go. So, like,
no, thank you.
Talk about that a little bit.
So housing, right? I'll be honest, the Brook House know how I feel about the Brook House. I did not want to go to the Brook House. It was the last place I ever wanted to be because I heard all these stories about it from brothers who kept going home and kept coming back, and they would use the house as an excuse. But once I got to Brook House, August 31st, 2023, that same night, the brother you had, brother Ali Swinks, he and I, we got out on the same day. We moved into the same room, and we rushed out of that house to go to school on Medford Tufts campus that same night. Come on, bro. What's better than that?
Yeah.
That's what I envisioned about. I said my first day home, I want to be in class. My full vision goes like this. I want to go to school on campus. I want to live on campus, and I want to work on campus because I can save a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right? So we ain't there yet, but...
time too, like especially someone who's done time. Time is precious.
Right.
That traveling, an hour here and there,
That's
you
a good
add
point.
that up over 5-6 years. You talk about how much time just traveling.
I know that's a good point. I never looked at it like that.
Yeah.
So, school, right out the rip, and walking into a community, bro, that care.
How important was it to have that structure though, something to do? You know what I mean? Because one of the first things I did when I got out was signed up for a trade school, just for something. I had no job lined up. I needed something to revolve my day around.
That's a great question, and the reality is it's needed. It's needed because inside of there, if we want structure or not, if we're living a structured life in there, we're living a meaningful life, there's the measure of structure. Because we got to get up for the 5 o'clock count. We got to go eat chow at the time they tell we got to eat chow. That's structure, that's routine. And a large part of rehabilitation is about a normative routine. So I watch brothers come home and I'm like, damn, he's not gonna do too good. Yo, she's not gonna do too good because they don't have structure. Because they're figuring out, what am I gonna do? They're sitting there, they're bored out of their minds and they're trying to figure out what to do. And I'm like, damn. I'm like, yo, go to the library. Yo, just go to Nero's Cafe, bro. You can pull up in there, sit down, drink coffee, read your book. Structure is monumental. Structure is monumental. Because I came out not only with structure, but with discipline. And something that my man Conan used to say to me, he said, Supreme, you know why I rock with you? He said, there's never a wasted moment in anything you do when you invite us in, and you always know the next step.
Intentional
the follow
and deliberate.
Intentional and deliberate is a plan. So I knew I absolutely had to go to school. If the Brook House was going to be the only house that accept me, I'm going to the Brook House. And it's been the best choice I made.
So just talk about that then. Looking back, do you think those people who were blaming it on the Brook House, was it really they just maybe weren't ready? Pointing the finger instead of never really taking accountability, a combination of both?
There's a combination of both, and most times it relies heavily on us because now you're seeing there's this growing cadre of men and women who are coming home and doing remarkable things. Why? We were ready.
Yeah.
We were ready to be out here. We were practicing these things on the inside. We were ready. People are astonished, like, how are you guys doing all these things this quick and this short? Because we were planning. Not only were we planning, but we had plans inside of those plans, inside of those plans. And we were prepared for disappointment. We were prepared to be on goal all the time. Man, that door shut, it wasn't for me. This one's gonna open up. Stay consistent. Yep. Consistency and patience. That's Brother Supreme. How do you do it? Consistency and patience, bro. Believe in your dream and dream. Please dream, bro. Imagine that you can do whatever you want to do. Nothing's off limit. I started college at 48. I'm thinking about my master's degree.
It's amazing.
Right, I'm thinking about my master's degree. And then I used to say to the boss, I'm going to send you a 60-day report. But I couldn't sit down. I couldn't slow down long enough to sit down because it was happening. 40, maybe 60 days, anywhere from 45 to 60 days, I was invited by Michelle Wu's, Mayor Michelle Wu, senior advisor, to accept a seat on her committee to end violence in the city. That's my work.
Wow. Congrats.
I said, man, thank you. I said, of course I'm going to do that, right? I've completed a TEDx talk, something on my bucket list. I said, I'm going to do a TED talk. Dream.
Yeah.
A TEDx talk. I've sat on 2 evaluation committees to award money, large amounts of money, to nonprofit organizations. Sat with judges, countless public speaking engagements, attended mayor's inauguration, and I always smile and say I'm supposed to be doing this because we planned for it and we prepared for it. We planned and we prepared.
Absolutely. And
we endured all the reentry hurdles before we came home, being inside of there. Nothing could be more polarizing of a society than prison. Because prison will put every obstacle in your way to send you back to the box, to the hole. That's the equivalent of being out here and recidivating. You got to come and you got to re-enter normative prison life.
Right.
You got to get back in programs, get back in school. You might miss a semester, so you're losing time. So all those things were preparation for all these things that I'm experiencing. And it's just the way my mind's wired, man. You ask me how I'm doing, I'm blessed, I'm focused, I'm privileged, and I'm privileged because I care.
That's what it's about.
That's what it's about.
I always like to spread the message for the youth. There's a lot of glorification, glamorizing of prison, the streets, and all that. So if you were to narrow it down to the worst part about prison, how would you explain that to somebody?
Wow, that's a great question. And as you think about it right now, Dr. Ken Hardy and Dr. Tracy Lasloff in this monumental book called Teens That Hurt, they talk about the aspect of devaluation, dehumanization of loss, disrespect, and rage. What I realized is that all these mitigating factors were present in all of our lives. And I can say this, I usually like to stand on I statement in all our lives because as a trauma-informed care facilitator, I got to facilitate a lot of circles in a lot of people's lives and hear their stories. So I know that those mitigating factors are pervasive. Nobody ever stopped to listen to us. And they say, Dr. Ken Hardy and Dr. Tracy Lasloff, they say that at the point of rage, if Luke just says, hey, Supreme, how are you doing? And truly cared enough to listen when I responded, there was a human connection made that said, oh, shit, somebody does care about me and I do matter. So the most important thing for these men and women is to be seen, is to know that they matter. Their lived experience is not the totality of who they are as a person. It's something that happened. It's something they went through. Something that a lot of them again, experience have given me this, feel very, very guilty about.
Yeah.
Very guilty about.
Absolutely. Why was it important for you to come up here and share your story?
Because platforms like this don't exist enough. And I think it was yesterday, no, it was at a leadership training with a colleague of mine, Glenn Williams, and Brother Abigail Foster, the Executive Director of Teen Empowerment. And I had always said that, you know what, I'm going to start a newsletter. And what we're going to do, we're going to profile successful reentry stories. And we're going to tell all the glow-up things that they're doing. Because when we look at our news media, their editorial board are giving directives, sensationalize all the bad things that are happening. So why is this important? Because it's a platform to spread this word. Bro, if I can do it, not only could you do it, but you could do it better than me, because we're going to be here to help you do it. We're going to be here to help you succeed.
Once again, I appreciate you coming through. This has been great. If there was anything that you wanted to touch on, maybe you didn't get a chance to.
Community is very, very important, in the type of community that I want to live in, that I want to be a part of making and supporting, is a community of care. With the Restorative Justice Initiative that I started and co-founded while at MCI Norfolk, that's what we did. We created a community that cares. And that community that cares superseded the walls of the prison that divided us from society and incarceration. Our flagship program was our annual conference. I'm happy to say that we still are doing work, because the work is needed. Being home 9.5 months, I see exactly how much is needed. I see that we can indeed replicate these microsystems of oppression within our own healthy communities. And if we don't slow down long enough to sit in circle or be in community with each other, it'll be people hurting people, and people healing people will never have an opportunity. So I am happy to share that for the first time, after organizing our conference inside of Norfolk, MCI Shirley, that we're importing it out into our community on June 27th and June 28th at Roxbury Community College. I could not be more excited than I am. We're bringing keynote speakers in from the great city of Boston. Then we're touching Chicago. We're touching Philadelphia. We're hearing from Miami. We're hearing from New York. We're hearing from dynamic youth leaders. But we all get to sit down in circle and have a catered lunch by Cambridge's own Blaze.
Hey, everybody got to eat. Salute.
Everybody got to eat. And I'm happy to say that upwards of 95% of our vending has been chitted out to businesses owned by formerly incarcerated persons.
Wow.
We have to be the change we want to see. This conference is representative of all of those things. I invite everybody, go to Responsible Party 3, go on Eventbrite, register for the conference. It's affordable. If you just come home and you've been home 5 years, it's free. If you're a college student, it's $35. If you are a student at Roxbury Community College, it's free. If you are a high school student, it's free. It's $125 per day for something that's easily worth an $800 ticket.
Wow.
And we didn't want to price the community out.
Yep.
We want to give something that the community will have every year going forward.
That's amazing.
So come out to the Restorative Justice Theory in Action Conference 2024 on June 27th and June 28th. You do not want to miss it. I guarantee you.
I feel left out. I'm going to be in Florida for a couple weeks, so I'll be there next year, man.
You'll be there next year.
Make sure y'all go check that out, too.
So tomorrow is the launch of our social media. We're on Instagram at Responsible Party Global. Catch us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or just catch somebody in the community, word of mouth.
Okay.
Let's stay connected. But we're on Instagram. Go to the website. Eventbrite, we out here.
Remember, it is what it is. What's next is what you make it. The Bounce Back Podcast. Bounce back, you got a moment when they see you down.